Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 65 of the Ventures podcast. I'm excited about today's episode with Yannick Folla. He is product lead over at Figment, which is a blockchain infrastructure provider. And as a product lead, he and I got to spend some time in New York last week, and there is a woeful lack of product people in the Web3 community. And we talked about this a little bit in last week's episode as well. And so in this episode, we start the introduction to how to train Web3 product managers. We talk about DAOs, we talk about DeFi, we talk about NFTs. We talk about, at the beginning, kind of the different products that Yannick has helped bring to fruition within Figment in particular, and how this is helping to serve token holders and developers and other members of the Web3 community. So, if you are listening to this episode, you can also watch by visiting wclittle.com, and there you'll see more extensive show notes to all the different things that we talk about. And there's a fair amount of homework for you if you're looking to ramp up in this space. And if you're watching, you can also listen anywhere that you get your podcasts. You can just search for Ventures. So with that, please enjoy this episode with Yannick Folla. All right, Yannick, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Very excited to get to talk about Web3 PMs.
Yeah. So we've had a number of shows on this podcast that have been dedicated to Web3. What is it? How do you think about it from an infrastructure perspective? What's the cool new technologies that are coming? What are the different decentralized applications and decentralized governance protocols that are being developed, et cetera, et cetera. But we haven't yet done a specific deep dive into product and people that have product management experience, specifically how they can add value to the ecosystem. So I'd love to just start with just a little bit about your story and kind of what got you into the Web3 world.
Yeah, sure. It's a fun story. So got started in crypto. So I was working in venture capital in 2015. I was asked to do research on Bitcoin, found blockchain technology very compelling. Bitcoin, not as much back then when it was supposed to be just a decentralized payment network. It found its new narrative along the way. But I started looking into alternatives to Bitcoin, found Ethereum early 2016, went all in, really believed in what smart contracts could unlock in terms of human and machine communication. So made a bet. Then fast forward in 2017, ICO started happening. Everybody in VC started freaking out because nobody understood what the hell was going on. And while I had some expertise after a year of being in the Ethereum ecosystem, so decided to leave my job in VC and start a consulting company, helping VCs and startups navigate tokenization, manage ICOs, and so on. Did that until ICOs kind of became demonized in the bear market of 2018. And then I spun the company around into staking as a service. That's how I initially met Lorian and Matt from Figment. We were competitors, but in a collaborative way, I'd say, where the space was just getting started. You only had Tezos on which you could run proof of stake nodes. So did that, raised some capital around the same time. Figment buys and trails and stake, raised some capital, and I just felt like, meant much more than I did. Just felt like as a 23-year-old founder in Montreal in a non-remote world where I didn't have the same access to talent and even way less cash and less experience, just felt like I wasn't equipped to compete. So I called my investors, gave back the capital, and I called Lorian at Figment to get operational experience in a field that I loved. So that's how I got started with Figment. Joined in sales initially, and then after maybe 9 months in, I think, just had that hitch to create again. And I saw an opportunity for us to offer infrastructure for devs, because we're doing an amazing job at offering infrastructure for token holders and securing proof of stake networks. The next logical step was to bring usage to those chains. So I thought, why not start a full node business? So went down that path, created DataHub, which is our blockchain development platform for Web3 devs. Then I went on to create Figment Learn, which is the Web3 knowledge base. I was seeing an opportunity to bring more devs into the space. Then I was kind of pulled back on the staking side to build our dashboard for stakers. And then more recently in June, I was pulled back to lead DataHub. So that's been a bit my story and my fun place at Figment. I've been jumping around and just following my creativity to create value for the company. And I'm entering a new challenge now where it's not just about creating something and moving on. Now I get to grow the product that I created with DataHub. So it's going to get very interesting for next year to come.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So if we assume the audience here are people that have some product experience, some management experience, and they're looking to get quickly up to speed in this world, I'd imagine everything you just said, you probably lost a few people. So let's unpack it a little bit.
Yeah.
And I'd love to dive right into you're running sales for Figment. Let's start there. How does
I used to
when you were running sales for Figment?
Yeah.
How does Figment make money? Because that in and of itself might actually be a good way to help product people think, because you've spun up multiple products within Figment. That might help people dive into this space a little bit in order to understand. We're going to assume people understand what proof of stake is, understand what blockchains are. So we don't have to go back to like blockchain 101. Plenty of other material we can point people to there. But I think starting from a product lens, how it makes money, how it's adding value to humans, that might be a good place to start.
Of course. So we have two major revenue drivers and two major divisions, let's say, Figment. One is our staking services and everything we do for token holders. So on that front, we operate as a staking as a service. That means that we go to token holders that own tokens from proof of stake networks, and we operate validators on those chains, and they will be able to stake their tokens with us. Meaning that we're going to be able to secure the chain using their tokens, and with the block rewards that we get from our work as validators, we'll give them back the rewards generated from their token, less a commission. So you can think of it as a percentage of assets under management on the revenue side for staking. On the staking side, we have also two sub products, I'd say, which are a dashboard that allows you to manage all your staking portfolio, get records of all the rewards you've earned, get news about all the protocols that you own in your portfolio. This is not a revenue generator per se. It's just, I'd say, an essential piece of the staking experience. So you stake with us, you get access to that. We also have Hubble, which is a validator explorer. So a platform where you're able to see all the metrics of all the validators on chains that we support, see their delegation history, get information regarding their performance, like have they been going down recently, have they been slashed, and so on. So the purpose of this product is really to drive awareness for our own brand, but also to get people confident about staking in Web3 and staking their proof of stake tokens. So see it a bit as a growth hacking tool where we're growing the total accessible market with Hubble. On the other end, we have all our developer-facing division. So our main product is DataHub. You can think of it a bit as a Heroku for Web3, where you will pick all the blockchains that you want to deploy your application on. You will pick your services that you're interested in for your app. So if you need indexing, if you need storage, if you need oracles, you can kind of pick and choose your own adventure based on the modules that you need for your Web3 app. And this is sold as a SaaS. So you want access to a blockchain, you need 100 million API requests per day, then we're going to charge X amount per month. And you want an add-on for indexing, an add-on for storage, then these are going to be another $50 per month each, for example. So traditional SaaS. Our fourth product is, again, kind of replicating that idea of growing the total accessible market for our core revenue driver. So it's called Figment Learn. And you can think of it as a bit the digital ocean knowledge base for Web3. So we have over 150 tutorials that are all for building applications and deploying smart contracts on blockchains in Web3. Half of them, at least, have been created by the community. So we actually have a program where we pay people in tokens to write tutorials, practical tutorials for devs that are then posted to our platform. And we also host what we call pathways or courses to take a dev from creating an account on chain all the way through deploying their first smart contract on a given blockchain. And the goal is that, we want to onboard the next million devs to Web3. We want to create that kind of easy onboarding for a Web2 dev to get into Web3. So Learn is that kind of vehicle, is that kind of platform that drives traffic, that gives brand recognition, and then creates those users that will then go on to build application using our infrastructure.
Love it. Love it. Okay. So let's take each one in turn here, and we'll start with the staking service, with the subproducts of the dashboard, and with Hubble. From a product perspective, right, you're helping to drive and create these products. How did you think about, like, how did you research the need from the user, right? We can point to resources again about proof of stake and what validators are and like how all that money. So we don't have to rehash that. And I'll put that in the show notes for those listening or watching here. But how did you approach it from a product perspective in terms of interviewing, knowing your customer, knowing the space, and then knowing that having the dashboard and having Hubble is value add to have people stake with Figment?
Yeah, so I like to think of this kind of as building blocks, right? You start with a core product. In our case, it was staking. Very simple. We run validators, you stake to us. We have no tooling on top of that. We provide you the bare minimum of what you need to stake. That allows you to get your early customers. What's your early customers? You interact with them. You have a good relationship because you're getting started. They're getting started. You're able to understand their pain points, ask them their pain points. And that's a bit how the dashboard came along. It would not be fair to say that we don't look at what the competition is doing as well, right? You always want to track everything that your strongest competitors are doing in the space. So at a given point, I remember looking at every single feature of every dashboard of every competitor, listing them, and then kind of recreating my own recipe for success based on what I've been seeing, but also what my customers have been saying that they are missing in the market. And that's a theme that we'll come back to, I think, often. And while we're together, I really like remixing existing solutions. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's about mix and matching what works for you to create your own recipe based on what's out there in the wild and what you're hearing from your customers.
That's good. That's good. So I imagine then the dashboard and Hubble are continuing to iterate as any other product would, based on the feedback from the customers, acquiring more customers.
That's right. Hubble is a bit different because we're building it for, I'd say the end user are validators and delegators, but the buyer is our foundations, essentially, the teams behind blockchains. Because when they're getting to market, when they're about to launch mainnet, they're like, we need a tool for validators to know how they're doing. We need a tool for delegators to discover new validators. So they come to us with a list of needs, and then we build it. Cool. So I'd say this would be the product that we've iterated on the less, just because it's a known value. Frankly, it's a great cash cow for us. It's a way to get acquainted with different ecosystems. It's a product we can, although there are different blockchains, we can kind of spin up pretty easily for a new chain, unless it's a weird architecture. So yeah, that's been really the kind of easy cash cow brand recognition play for the Hubble.
That's fantastic. Yeah, no, I like the multiple facets of how you've approached that. So, all right, so then let's talk about DataHub, right? Heroku for Web3. I mean, that's a very succinct, very big, amazing vision, very applicable to product people listening in, because if they're trying to think about how to take their business case and make it a Web3, make it into the Web3 paradigms, there's a lot of confusion even right there. So maybe let's talk about how to educate a Web3 PM. They may come from a Web2 or different worlds in the context of what you've done with DataHub, if that question makes sense.
Sure. Yeah, so I think what I said regarding pattern matching here is even more important, I'd say, because when it comes to devs, if we're going to be onboarding more devs to Web3, they need to feel like it's a familiar space. They need to feel like they're not too confused about the tooling, the platforms that are available to them. But they also want to leverage the full potential of these blockchains, of these Web3 protocols. So the way I've gone about it, and it's not a one solution fits all, of course, but I went with a very Web2 like flow, I'd say, imitating Heroku, and how the apps come together, how you go into an app and then you add your services, you add your modules, and the flow is very similar. It feels very familiar, I'd say, for a dev. Which is a great thing, because as soon as you remove that kind of barrier to entry where they feel like this is too complicated, this is not worth their time, this is going to be too much time to get accustomed to, so they just move on to the next thing. You want them to get kind of hooked right away in terms of, okay, this doesn't seem too scary. Let me look into what it can actually do. And that's where you go full on with your Web3 technologies. So you need at the same time to balance this kind of Web2 UX with a deep understanding of Web3 primitives and what Web3 protocols can offer and how to leverage them. I think that's the biggest trick to becoming a Web3 PM. It's not only about, let's build on Ethereum, but it's understanding as a dev, in our case, what other layers do you use? You use your indexing, your storage, your oracles. Fine, okay, now that you understand that these layers exist, how do you really leverage them? How do you package them together so that they feel like one unit? And this can be replicated across different types of stakeholders, right? If you're building a remittance app, you probably want it to feel like it's Venmo, but that's on steroids, because it's using crypto.
Right.
If you're creating a DEX, you probably want it to feel like you're trading stocks, but in a much smoother flow, and a bit of a geekier flow as well, maybe, where you feel like you're actually interacting with the chain and the tokens themselves. So yeah, I like this approach, the Web2 UX, with you can sexify it if you want, but with those Web3 primitives, so that it feels familiar, but it feels more powerful.
So the need for DataHub comes from listening to developers and people building in Web3 patterns, and they're asking for, we need something more familiar. We need it to be like Heroku. We need it to facilitate some aspects of our DevOps that we would have to go build ourselves, and so therefore it's a no-brainer to go use DataHub.
I wouldn't say that they would say,
okay,
we need a Heroku for Web3.
Okay.
That's where you'll see the difference between a great PM and a good PM or a bad PM. It's about finding that kind of reference that you need to fix a pain point that you're hearing over and over again. In our case, I was hearing that it was painful to use 4 different providers across 4 different platforms just to manage a single app on Ethereum. So again, you would need your full nodes, you would need your decentralized storage, you would need your indexing, and you would need to go to different companies, different platforms every time with all different UX. What Heroku was great at doing was creating this kind of command center to your Web2 application. And that's where I get the reference. DataHub is becoming the command center to Web3 apps, where we're aggregating decentralized technologies and making their access easier. So I mean, great for you if your customer tells you, I need exactly this, but usually they'll tell you, here are my issues.
Right.
Please fix them. So that's where it's useful to be able to have a wide library of references, both in a Web 2 and Web 3 world, from which you can pick based on the problem you're facing.
Got it. Okay, cool. Yeah, no, that's great. And so, okay, so the last one with Figment Learn, before we get to like the particulars of sort of training, helping to train the PMs on the different aspects of Web3. But so with Figment Learn, then the goal is to just get a lot more developers trained up on the different patterns, the different tools, the different things that can be built on these different chains. Can you talk a little bit more about that, just from the perspective of a dev? Let's say I'm a software engineer, we're writing code for 15 years, and everybody's talking about blockchain. And so, why should I go to Figment Learn?
Yeah, for sure. So we started by doing these pathways where you would essentially learn how to create a smart contract on one of 8 different blockchains that we've partnered with. That allows you to get the basics of, how does a network work, but also how does a smart contract work. That's really the first step into understanding at least what the hell's going on a given blockchain. After that, the goal of incentivizing people to write more tutorials is to go deeper into those use cases. Now that you know how to build a smart contract on Solana, let's learn how to use it to build the decentralized exchange. Let's learn how to deploy our own NFT marketplace. Let's learn how to make cross-contract calls between different smart contracts. How do you go deeper now that you have a basic understanding? So our goal is, and this is a long-term approach, of course, but we want to build all the material that will be able to kind of help a dev throughout their life cycle going into Web3, from the first time they ever hear about Web3 all the way to building the next killer app on Web3. So that's been the idea. Some big ideas that we have as well with Learn are to essentially, and that feels like a natural next step, is to create a decentralized Stack Overflow, where we already have the community that's helping each other. We already have the platforms where people are asking questions. Next step is just to tokenize that interaction and allow people to create their own economy around helping each other build.
That's amazing. Yeah, we'll definitely look forward to that. Okay, so all of the terms that you just mentioned that you're training through the pathways as a dev is going through Figment Learn. Let's talk about those, because somebody listening in may not know what Solana is, may not know what a smart contract is, right? They have no idea what a decentralized autonomous organization is. So let's take these in order. So from the perspective of somebody coming through and they're engaging with Figment Learn, they're going to basically first learn what is the dev first coming into the space? What are they learning? And so what are our PMs going to need to know about this?
The way we go about it, at least, is to make it, again, feel very familiar. The first steps are essentially just calling an API and a given method that allow you to first request tokens from a faucet and create an account like a wallet, which you fund with that faucet. Then you query your own balance. So now you know how to query the balance of a given wallet. Then you post a transaction, so from your wallet to another wallet, and then you get into smart contract building. But essentially, the first steps are just allowing you to understand that this shouldn't be a scary beast, right? This is just more APIs. It's languages that you're used to, JavaScript, Rust. And slowly we get you into those use cases that feel like you're getting away from Web 2, but initially we still give you that transition, right? So I'd say that's the first step. Then what we're doing now is an end-to-end application development, where you don't only learn how to deploy a smart contract, but also how to use indexing protocols to pull data from your smart contract, not just from the blockchain itself. Then how to store that data in the centralized storage protocol, then going down that stack.
Got it. Yeah. So that's a very important set of tools that, as you are training developers to think about how to query, how to post transactions, how to think about decentralized storage, the purpose, right? The product managers listening in are going to be thinking, I have this business use case, right? And so it might be helpful for us to maybe, as we're talking about what is a DAO, what is a smart contract, what is an oracle, these are all the different topics that we're going to need to dive into here. It might be helpful to do it in the context of something maybe something trivial. I don't know if you have an example already that you use with Figment Learn, but if we, like, off the top of my head, if we wanted to recreate Twitter, right? I know people
That's
can find
exactly what's coming up.
Oh yeah, okay. So if we wanted to recreate Twitter,
yeah.
In a web, I know various folks throughout the last 6, 7+ years have been attempting to do this on chain. How would you do it, right? First of all, what would be the paradigm changes that you would have to think from a Web 2 to Web 3? And then I might stop you along the way here as we talk about these particular terms.
Yeah, good question. I think to build a decentralized version of something, you need to really understand why you would want it to be decentralized in the first place. What are the pain points that could be solved with decentralization? The reason I say that is in 2017, 2018, when we saw those ICOs, it was decentralize everything, right? We're launching decentralized Uber, we're launching decentralized LinkedIn, and whatnot. Always the centralized version of their Web 2 counterparts, a bit like the first version of the internet was just about launching digital storefronts to physical stores, right? So before going into this and decentralizing Twitter, you need to understand what decentralization can do for you in this case. And it's not just people own their data or people will get paid for your tweets. You need to understand the mechanics of why they would get paid. Where would those payments come from? Where would those tokens be created from? How do you maintain a token economy if that's what your Twitter is going to be built on? So you need to understand the primitives of Web3 really well before trying to decentralize something. Otherwise, you're just going to put essentially a website on a blockchain, and it becomes very, very slow, very inefficient, and everybody's unhappy. Blockchains are useful when you use them to create a use case that cannot be done in the Web 2 space, and that is 10x better than its counterpart. If you're just moving something to the blockchain to replicate it, it's going to be horrible. So you need to understand why and what kind of primitives. By primitives, I mean the blockchains themselves, but also NFTs, DeFi, decentralized autonomous organizations. When you put all those together, what can you create? What recipe can you create that will actually make this decentralized Twitter better? So I'd say I'd take a step back and I'd learn a lot.
Okay, so then let's talk about that homework. Let's talk about that homework, the primitives in Web3 that people listening in should go investigate. And we'll put links in the show notes here. And you mentioned DeFi, NFTs, DAOs. Anything else you'd add to that list? And are there specific resources that you would point them to, or do we need to write those up, or what would you recommend?
There's a great resource collection that's called the Crypto Canon by A16Z. They also have an NFT canon. And it's about like 40 articles that are well curated to cover everything you should know about Web3 and then about NFTs. That's a great place to start. Also, personally, something that has really opened my eyes in terms of creativity and potential of Web3 is called the Metaverse Primer by Matthew Ball. The reason I bring this up is that for me, Web3 still hasn't gotten its iPhone moment. And by iPhone moment, I don't mean killer app. I mean the moment where its primitives come together under a single platform. And that's where you can innovate and create use cases that are unseen before and that are 100x better than their Web 2 or physical counterpart. The iPhone brought together the GPS, the phone, the browser, the MP3, all those together created apps that changed the lives of a lot of people. And those use cases were not possible with just a website or in the real world. I feel that the metaverse, these digital and expandable worlds built on blockchains, will be that kind of iPhone moment where NFTs, DeFi, and DAOs will live together on top of these chains and these virtual worlds. And that's when we're going to see that real explosion of innovation, where people will not think about cryptocurrencies and blockchains for its speculation advantages, but they will think about it because it's where they spend most of their time. It's where they found use cases that have changed their lives. So to properly understand Web3, I like to attach it to the metaverse and how those primitives come together. It really helps you kind of frame where this space could be in 4 or 5 years.
I like that. Yeah, because even if we just talk about what is the definition of Web3, right? There's sort of the old school semantic web, Web3 is allowing computers to ingest ontologies of information, like knowledge graphs, in order to present more interesting things for humans via AI, et cetera, et cetera. And there's the people that say, well, Web3 is actually the metaverse. It's spatial computing. It's sort of thinking about spaces and the way that humans interact now in these artificial, in these virtual realities. And then there's the people like, oh no, Web3 is blockchains and smart contracts and decentralized ABC, governance and storage and all these things. Is that a fair, is my three little prime, is that a fair kind of description of how different people describe Web3, or how would you frame it? How do you?
It might be a fourth.
Ah.
For me, Web3 is the next generation of the internet that is built by communities and creators, and where the value creators are also the ones that capture the value.
Yeah, because that was the original vision back when everybody was thinking, let's decentralize Uber and Twitter and Facebook. Right? let's have it governed by the people, owned by the people, financially incentivized by the people, financially rewarded by the people. And so maybe for a history lesson for folks listening in, watching in, why did that original wave fail? Or if you, at least from my perspective, it failed. But why? Like, was it because it was all clunky and slow? Is it because people didn't approach it from a truly Web3 paradigm? Or was it an infrastructure problem? Yeah.
Threefold. I think the technology was not ready to have something of that scale pushed to the mainstream audience. Ethereum was never meant to process Uber's demand, for example. Made no sense. People were not ready, I think. As I said, even today, blockchains and cryptocurrencies are still seen very much for their speculation benefits, not as much for their advantages in terms of UX and apps and the power of those apps. So I think just people were not ready to use such solution versus their Web2 counterpart because the technology was not ready, so they sucked. So there was actually no advantage in using a decentralized counterpart. I think those would be the biggest reasons. Also, well, back then, those creators were all about, cash grabs, and they were just in because it was the next big thing to decentralize versus it made sense to decentralize it at that time. So yeah, I think not ready, not the right people, not the right audience.
Let's talk about decentralized governance. So obviously co-ops and such have been around for a long time, to some various degrees of success, right? There are very popular grocery stores and things like REI, et cetera, that have been run in these paradigms. But what do Web3 product folks need to know about decentralization from a philosophical perspective with regard to governance? And what do they know about the state of DAO technologies, DAO patterns today?
Well, I think what we're seeing in Web3 around DAOs is that communities can have their own economies and their own rules and their own ways of doing. What we're seeing with DAOs is that it can be very flexible in its use cases. We have investment DAOs where people come together, pull their capital, and invest. We have social DAOs where people get together because they have a similar interest. We have work DAOs where people contribute work towards a similar vision. And we have creative DAOs where people create given world together or learn together for the same goal. Those use cases will keep on expanding. What's interesting is that we always knew mankind was tribalistic in a way. We've always liked to surround ourselves with people that think like us, that have similar goals. Web3 with tokens and DAOs allow you to kind of put that model on steroids again, because now you can put your money where your mouth is. You can collaborate financially and productively with people that think like you. So I think that's the future of how communities interact. You could think of every subreddit, I think there's 130,000 today, as DAOs in a way, where they also have their reputation system, they have their rules. You need enough points to be able to vote. You can allocate tips. I mean, that's just, Web3 waiting to happen. This is a DAO waiting to happen. People have organized online as communities, have set their own rules. Decentralized governance is just giving them the tool they've been waiting for.
So where are these DAOs actually building? Like the code behind the DAOs, where is that? Is it all on Ethereum? Are people experimenting with other chains now?
Yeah.
What do you need to do right now to build a DAO? Like where's a good place to start?
Yeah, good question. Most of them are on Ethereum because most of the tools are on Ethereum. The problem is it's very expensive to do anything on chain on Ethereum. So now you have a slew of tools that allow you to, for example, vote without actually casting a vote on chain. It just takes like a picture of your balance at any given time off chain. You need a third-party tool to manage your treasury. It is fairly complicated. We are seeing some of those solutions migrate, or at least support also Polygon, which is a scalable solution to Ethereum that's connected to Ethereum. So you have like all the benefits of Ethereum, but at a much, much cheaper cost. That's already interesting. You have a blockchain like Near that does have a big focus on DAOs that has some of the tooling also coming out. But I'd say it's still very early outside of Ethereum and its ecosystem, including Polygon. I've recently created a DAO using Aragon on Polygon. It's also available on Ethereum. Great experience. In a few clicks, you name your organization, you set your governance rules, you create your token, and you create your stakeholders who's going to be holding the tokens. And then you can vote on all the rules around token distribution, treasury management. It's a solid platform. I think it's still lacking a lot of tools. You have to, again, plug in some other solutions like nuances say for treasury and like snapshot for voting if you don't want to do it on chain. But it's getting there. So Aragon is a good place to start for someone who just wants to play around and see what's available today.
Is that the same Aragon from 3-4 years ago? That was, yeah, it is. Oh, cool. Yeah, I remember. So I did a lot of research and a lot of writing in that 2017, 2018 timeframe. And it's interesting to see like which ones just fell off a cliff and we never heard from again, which ones iterated and pivoted into different areas, and which ones actually fulfilled what they were saying they were going to fulfill and what they were going to build. Because a lot of that is happening, years later of all that original vision, because it just takes time, right? It takes time to get all this up and running. Okay, so anything else on DAO? So you say PMs should go. We'll put the links in the show notes here to Aragon. And
yeah, what's really interesting about DAOs for PMs is the way they manage their communities and their tokens. So again, you have some, well, actually what's interesting is how the different token models out there, because that's good weapons for you in your arsenal when you're ready to create your own model. The mix and match based on how community is arranged around a given token economy to pick the best of what you see that matches your use case. That's great. So it is worth it to explore a few DAOs, just to see what's been done and how people are coordinating as communities.
Cool. All right, so that's DAOs. Let's finish off this episode by talking about DeFi, and by talking about NFTs. So, what's the rapid fire? What do people need to know about DeFi? How do you approach it? What are the best tools? To at least from a very brief introduction to where to send people to learn more about DeFi.
Yeah, good question. I think the three platforms or protocols they should look at are Uniswap, Aave, and Y Finance. The reason I say that is that Uniswap is a centralized exchange in AMM, allows you to trade tokens between different pools of tokens, core part of the DeFi stack. Aave lets you borrow and lend tokens in a decentralized fashion. Wi-Fi allows you to kind of stake tokens and get yield from different pools of tokens that are being run by different groups of communities. So I'd say they're like the three pillars of the DeFi space. Just understanding the concepts behind DeFi pools, behind lending, borrowing, and investing as a community is a good start to get those kinds of core concepts. Then it's up to them to dive deeper into their documentation and really understand how pools work, for example.
Yeah.
For NFTs, it's an interesting rabbit hole. I think really a good place to start in terms of resources is probably the NFT canon from A16Z. There are a lot of categories in NFTs. You have art on marketplace like Super Rare that is actually for digital artists and collectors. You have collectibles led by the crypto punks and the Bored Apes. Those take a bit longer to understand, I feel, because it's all about the power of community, the power of status online. If you own one of these, you're part of a community, you have a certain status. And as we move to a more digital first world and you spend more time online, the value attached to who you are in those digital worlds will supplant everything that you can do in the physical world to upgrade your status. So that's why they're going so crazy. So it's worth investigating what's going on the collectibles side. But then you also have games. People earn a lot of money playing games, earning NFTs, and providing back ownership essentially to the gamers. People are now incentivized for the hours they're spending playing the game, which is a fascinating concept. And you also have NFTs as access points. So if you own my NFT, then you'll be able to come to my events. You're able to enter my Discord channel. You're able to get discounts. There's going to be more and more mechanisms around NFTs because essentially they're just a digital certificate attached to any type of digital or physical asset or even digital right. So yeah.
And we can learn about all those in A16Z's NFT canon material?
I do believe so.
Okay. If there's anything missing, we'll make sure to backfill from that for sure. How hard is it to spin up something like the Bored Ape Yacht Club? Like how hard is it to spin up a club of NFTs? Does an NFT club as a service exist already, or should?
It's easy to create a generative project where you have 1,000 to 10,000 NFTs that just have different attributes. You can hire an artist to create like 100 types of accessories, 10 types of hair, 15 types of necklaces, and then you just run them through an algorithm and they're just randomly matched, right? That's easy to do. What's hard to do is to create a real community around it. There's so much noise, so much shit happening around collectibles, everybody trying to make a lot of money off a drop, but really you need to create a strong community that believes that they want to be part of your community, that there is value attached to owning one of them, either because of the strength of your roadmap, where you're going to say that this is going to be integrated in games, you're going to get access to X or Y, or because of the people that have been part of this community so far. That doesn't change. I think the reason why you'd like to be associated with a group are the same in the digital world as the physical world. But that's the hard part to nail if you're creating a collectible project. You can't just launch a new version of monkeys and hope that it works. There's a lot of work.
Got it. Cool. And is this the same NFT that CryptoKitties and others were built on? What was that, ERC 721, or what was the protocol?
Yeah, that's right. ERC 721. There are some ERCs 1151 now. Essentially, the only difference is that they're minted officially. They're like sleeping in the mempool, and they are only created officially when they're bought. So it's not the artist who mints them and pays for the fees. It's the collector that buys them. That's the main difference.
Got it. Cool. All right. Well, Yannick, this is a great introduction. This is great part one. I'm excited to share this with a number of people that are looking to dive into the space and learn more. Obviously, we're going to have a small or a large quantity of homework for PMs that are looking to dive in here. And I think this is a great place to start. Anything else you would add before we wrap up about things that PMs coming into the space should be aware of?
Keep learning. I think I've been in space for 5 years and I'm learning a lot every day still about every new concept that's coming out. Be active on Twitter. I think this is my biggest source of knowledge in this space. So don't be afraid. Even if you don't know what to tweet, start interacting in other tweets and commenting and get yourself out there. It's important to make a brand for yourself, but also to learn about what's going on in real time.
Yeah, that's good. All right. And how can people find you online and ask you more questions?
Twitter works. Yannick Folla.
Awesome. Really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Pleasure.
All right, a couple quick things before you go. Number one, I have a general newsletter where I write about technology and startups and health science and teaching people to code. And I write about a variety of different subjects that we talk about on this show. So if you go to wclittle.com, there you'll be able to subscribe, and you'll also be able to subscribe to particular topics. If you're just interested in one or a few of them, you'll be notified right when I publish new content in those areas. Number two, my partners and I at Proto Ventures have a portfolio company called Startup Rocket. If you go to startuprocket.com, there you'll be able to receive coaching guides and customize an operations framework for you and your team and your advisors to be on the same page in terms of what is the appropriate next step for you and your entrepreneurial journey. And finally, if you wouldn't mind leaving a review anywhere that you have listened to this podcast or watched this podcast, it would be super helpful to help those who might be interested in consuming this content as well. Thank you.